We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. First item is closed meeting. Be it resolved, the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia hereby enters into closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following. Section 2.2-3711, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific officers, appointees, or employees of any public body. Number one, the Community College Board. Number two, Economic Development Authority. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Secretary?
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Frizikowski?
Aye.
6 ayes.
We are in closed session.
Moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Secretary?
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Chair Christiakowski?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next up is the certification of the closed meeting. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia, hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirement by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies. And two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion conveying the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Secretary?
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Christiakowski?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next up is our invocation and pledge, and we will be led tonight by our Assistant County Administrator.
Please rise for a moment of silence, and then I will lead us in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next up under presentations, recognitions, and awards, the Virginia Tech Montgomery Executive Airport. And we have Keith Holt.
Evening.
Thank
Good evening. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Keith Holt. I am the Airport Director of the Virginia Montgomery Executive Airport. I started at the airport at the end of July 2020. Prior to that, I was Airport Manager of the New River Valley Airport in Dublin. I've lived in the Blacksburg-Montgomery County area since 2006. Since 2001, the airport has been operated by the Virginia Tech Montgomery Regional Airport Authority, which is comprised of a 5-person board representing 4 entities, including Montgomery County, Virginia Tech, Town of Blacksburg, and the Town of Christiansburg. The mission statement of the Airport Authority is to develop a regional airport based on the mission of servicing the corporate executive markets and other general aviation markets, obtaining grants and loans and other funding for airport improvements, as well as other activities promoting and assisting in regional economic development. Most recently, we completed a runway extension at the airport that took the airport from roughly 4,500 feet in length to 5,500 feet in length. When you include the land acquisition construction cost, shifting one end further away from Main Street, the overall project was $21 million, of which 98% of that was funded with a combination of federal and state grant funding. Let me repeat that, 98% grant funded. The red lines on this map designate where the old runway ends were, and the new runway length in its full is shown in the graphic there. What this did is we shifted the runway end slightly further away from Main Street in order to come into full compliance with the FAA's required runway safety zones off both ends of the runway. We also demolished the old hokey hangar, which also allowed us to meet current FAA safety standards. While 1,000 feet of additional length may not sound like much, in the aviation world, getting to 5,500 feet is a true game changer. With the extended length, the airport is now able to accommodate roughly 72% of the business jet fleet operating in today's market, including the larger Citation jets, Bombardier Challenger jets, and even certain Gulfstreams. Nearly every Fortune 500 company in the United States that operates their own corporate aircraft has at least one aircraft in their fleet that can now take off and land at the Virginia Montgomery Executive Airport. The airport is home base to 2 corporate jets and roughly 45 aircraft. We see a wide variety of corporate traffic in support of local businesses and surrounding industries. While air traffic has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, largely corporate, charter, and private aviation remained much more stable than the passenger commercial airline services. The benefits of flying in a corporate aircraft or private charter were viewed during the pandemic as being much less risk exposure versus large packed airline passenger flights. New also for us this year, due to the extended runway, we were able to accommodate charter flights for both the men's and women's basketball teams. I'd like to quote Virginia Tech men's basketball coach Mike Young here. He had told Tech Talk Live, quote, "I feel like I've died and gone to heaven. We were back in Blacksburg last night at 11:30. It's helpful. There's certainly nothing wrong with going to Roanoke, but unloading the plane, loading the bus, and driving 30 to 40 minutes to Blacksburg is tough. Most of the kids live just a few minutes from the Blacksburg airport. It's awfully convenient for them to get them home a little bit earlier." Just the runway expansion and the recent hangar improvements alone are expected to have a $24 million economic impact over a 3-year period. The airport is one of those tools that we talk about in our region's economic development toolbox. New industries and businesses reach our community oftentimes through the doors of the airport. If it's BAE, Corning, Dish Network, or Chicken Salad Chick, if it's construction companies or engineering firms sending folks to oversee large building projects in the area, or if it's Norfolk Southern and the governor announcing the return of passenger rail service, oftentimes the airport is a critical part of the economic development linked to this community. We all understand that our community swells in population during the Virginia Tech football games, and the airport is no exception to that. Football games are no doubt one of our busiest days of the year, but the growth in the community and our region continues to drive the need for the airport to also keep pace. The completion of the runway extension checked off a huge box for the airport's development and was well over 10 years in the making. The airport will continue to look for ways to maximize grant funds and we will help to have the airport keep pace with the community's growth, whether through future hangar construction, ramp expansions, or just working to maintain and preserve our existing facilities. Our goal is to be the welcome mat for the community. One of the first things the governor said when he got off the plane last week was, "Wow, I like the new runway." The impression that I want to try to lead us forward with is, "Wow, great airport." That is what we are striving for. I thank you for your time this evening. I would be more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, we'll go around the room. Supervisor King, do you have any questions?
No, sir. Thank you for coming.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Shepherd?
Thank you for the presentation. I got a pilot's license out there in 1984.
Very nice.
Before that, I marched on the tarmac in the Civil Air Patrol. So
Okay, yeah.
I spent quite a bit of time at that airport.
And the Civil Air Patrol is still active today.
That's great. Is there room to expand that runway further now?
Without further land acquisition, the answer to that would be minimal. It could extend a few more 100 feet, possibly another 300 to 500 without land acquisition. You start to get past that 300 to 500 foot mark, and it would require additional land acquisition. The airport had made some land acquisition off of Main Street, as you all may be well aware of, and then we also had done a bit of a swap of land with the university to acquire the property all the way up to Southgate Drive. Essentially, currently, the runway safety area extends all the way almost to roughly where the Huckleberry Trail crosses there at the one end of the departure end of the runway. Further moving either of the trail, very unlikely of which that we would be able to further move Southgate. Likely what we would look to do for the expansion of further pavement is do what they call displaced thresholds, which means you only add the additional runway length on one end of the runway, of which that would give you that opportunity to use that for takeoff. However, that part of that is not used then for landing. So that would give us some additional length abilities. Further length past about our current 5,500, maybe 5,800 would definitely require further road movement and land acquisitions. Possible, yes. Economical and feasible at this point in time, I would say likely not in the immediate scope.
That's good. That's all I have. I was just curious.
Sure, absolutely.
Supervisor DeMonts?
Well, I don't, we have a representative from VDOT here to do some more work further in the agenda, and I'm sure he's cringing at the thought of Southgate.
They're not looking at me.
Can't change that. No, thank you for being here, and I know that it's strange to change jobs in the midst of a global pandemic, so I hope that you found settling into the new job has been easy. I know you've got a great teammate there with Mary, so thank you for being here tonight. It's really nice to have the presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Supervisor Blevins?
Very nice presentation, Mr. Holt, and I'd like to thank the board for that 98% of funding through grants. That is awesome for that.
It's a very good return on investment.
Yes, sir, it is, and so important for economic growth. Can you tell me an average of the monthly use? How many aircrafts are coming through?
So typically on any one given day, on average, we're averaging about 3 to 4 business jets per day. That varies obviously day to day as far as if there's more activity going on versus not. We tend to see a lot of activity more towards the beginning of the week and more towards the end of the week, just typical business type of travels and flights.
Very good. Well, we greatly appreciate your presentation and your hard work because obviously we need connectability to bring businesses and a great impact for economic growth. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Supervisor Bone?
Great presentation. Thank you for coming. Welcome
Thank you.
to your new position. South Main Street, I guess what you're referring to is that the airport bought the property across the street from
That is correct.
Okay, so no development can still happen on that lot.
That is correct. That's inside the runway protection zoned area. That is correct.
And then your map that had all the lines and different colors and stuff like that, could you just take a moment and kind of talk about some of the major colors maybe, or?
So this is our most recent airport layout plan and master plan map all combined into one. The dark green buildings here are already constructed buildings. The lighter blue buildings would be where we would have planned future growth and development of buildings. Almost all of these buildings themselves are aircraft hangars. The runway extension was shown on this map. This does not currently reflect ultimately what was just built and constructed. It is that length. However, I'm actually meeting with the engineering staff this week in order to update this particular configuration for the airport itself. This would be Main Street right through here, and these would be that property area of which that we were just discussing. The green shaded line is actually the airport boundary. That is our airport map. This area in through here, some of this area of which that we hold an easement not specific as to land deed. We hold some of that area as an easement with the university. The red buildings here were buildings of which that either slated to be demolished or were demolished. This was the old Hokie hangar. This sat inside the safety zone for the runway, so it was demolished. Some of the old dairy barn properties are still located or shown on this map. Those were relocated with the Southgate interchange as part of the airport project mixed in.
Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Absolutely.
Vice Chair Biggs?
Well, I've been bragging about you ever since we hired you, so they've been hearing your name for a while. But what I want to say is, not only did the governor say something about the airport, but so did the CEO from Norfolk Southern. It was very complimentary. And one thing that Keith has done, the Airport Authority Board identified some goals that we wanted our new director to be involved in. And we wanted the airport to be able to bring in community members to activities. So that was sort of hard during COVID, but it's something that Mr. Holt is working on. I don't know if you want to mention a couple of things that you're working on, because they haven't come to, I mean, they're in the planning process. Another thing we wanted was we wanted someone to be a really good communicator with the pilots that use the airport and with the neighbors that surround the airport, and he's done a really good job with that. In fact, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing to say, but we don't have people really coming to our meetings anymore, you know, upset about things. So in my mind, that's a good thing, okay? So, and the other thing we wanted is to make the airport like a more welcoming, like Mr. Holt was talking about, place for people coming in. This is going to be an important tool in the further economic development of our county and the Corporate Research Center. And so I think what Keith is trying to do, what is it that people coming in want to see? What is it they want when they arrive? What would be something that we could do to make pilots feel more welcoming? You know, that kind of thing. So he's been exploring a lot of different things in that way, and really good about keeping up with the grant money. So I don't know if you want to comment on any of those other things, but that's sort of what's going on right now.
Yeah, an airport itself very much is like a community individually by itself. And oftentimes, a lot of the textbooks that you go back and read will say that an airport is, per square acre, one of the most highly regulated areas in an entire community. I've got to deal with essentially every possible federal agency of which that you could think of, every potential state agency of which that you could think of in some way, form, or shape or fashion out at the airport when you're dealing with everything from stormwater to air regulations to safety standards. There's an awful lot to balance. However, a part of that balance, and a critical part of that balance, is how the airport also fits in with the community as the whole. And the easy aspect is to look at it from economic development, but there's also more to it than that. There's going to be a future, a next generation of pilots of which that, you know, and of folks interested in the market and in the fields of aviation, of which that we need to look out for. We need to be good stewards of the airport, to help entice, to promote, you know, those ambitions and goals of which that they may potentially have, be it an aircraft mechanic or be it a pilot or any one of the other fields of which that they may choose to get involved with. There's also, I think that, you know, unfortunately, airports have all had to put up fencing around the airport. That makes airports, by its nature, very uninviting. And that's very difficult to overcome with a lot of community members, because when you pull up to the airport, the first things that you see, fencing all around it, and it essentially says, don't get close, stay out. You know, it could be a federal crime if you cross this line. So trying to make sure that the airport is within our regulatory boundaries as invitable and as welcoming as possible for the community and to be a part of the community as a whole. I oftentimes relate to a lot of people, especially a lot of the airport neighbors, really close, that live in close to the airport. the airports, if you go on Google Maps, a lot of times the airports are one of the few amounts in areas of green space within a community. Easily to identify, really close to the community, but sometimes and oftentimes in a lot of communities across the country, the last remaining green space of which that really truly is left within the community. So this is, roughly about 275 acres of which that, having the airport here and the runway here keeps preserved as a good green space of which that also provides us direct community access. So trying to be welcoming and inviting while also balancing the regulatory requirements of the airport is certainly a goal that I have very much in the front of my mind.
Thank you.
Well, that was an excellent presentation, and it reminded me of the one that I heard you and your predecessor give at Eggs and Issues.
Almost 2 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
been a while, but
Yes.
I learned more about those two airports than I ever knew, and this is probably something that a lot of citizens don't understand the need for and the benefit of having an airport like we do. So I'm very glad that you came tonight. I hope a lot of people are watching tonight, and they're going to learn something too from this, that it is quite a benefit. But the only question I have is, do you ever lose any sleep worrying about one of them drones getting out of that big cage they have over there at Virginia Tech?
The cage itself and certainly the activities, the drone activities sponsored by the university, does not cause me a lot of lost sleep. However, all the other drone possibilities certainly will. Drones and manned aircraft is a very unique and interesting mix right now. And flying of a drone takes on a great amount of responsibility, of which that I'm not sure that the average individual who may be a drone operator fully understands. And that is the standpoint that when you operate an unmanned vehicle, a drone, you, the operator, are solely responsible for ensuring of which that drone flight does not interfere with manned aircraft. That should be blazoned on the box someplace when they sell the drones. And unfortunately, it is not. But it is a huge responsibility that, when done right, is done very safely. However, it's unfortunately those of which that may not know the rules or may choose to fly it higher or closer to an aircraft just for the sake of, well, I could do it, of which that jeopardizes safety. So that part of it absolutely does keep me awake.
All right, well, I didn't mean to give you any nightmares tonight, but we appreciate you very much coming before us, and we wish you the best of luck in your future
Thank you.
planning and taking care of our airport. So
Thank you
thank
much.
you very
Appreciate
much. All righty, next up is another public hearing. This is the joint public hearing with VDOT for the secondary six-year road plan for fiscal year 2021, 2022, and 2026 to 2027. That's a long time.
Good evening. So staff is going to run through just a couple of things related to why we do these hearings and the role of the board before David comes up and talks about our projects. Basically, the secondary six-year plan provides funding for secondary roads, but not in the way that it used to. So current funding comes from tele-fees and unpaved road funding. And so you'll notice every year when we look at these roads, they're unpaved. We use the term tele-fees a lot, but just in case we've never really taken the time to dive into that, that's based on use fees for public rights-of-way that are acquired by VDOT. And that's an estimate. And so it can vary based on financial climate. So, we have some estimates that they're working off of this year, but, we had an interesting year. So basically, we're going to talk about the number one priority, or as David puts it on there, the zero is always to kind of work out anything that's left over from the last year. So write that budget before we get into road projects. The previous funding formula that's been gone for probably about a decade provided us more funding and provided us more flexibility. And so some of you will remember we used to have a very long list. It had a lot of roads on there. We actually used to move roads through a little quicker. And then the board in place a couple of years after that funding change made the decision to have a shorter list that looked more possible instead of having a longer list that would just sit for years and years and years. And so what we put together this evening and what you guys look at is what VDOT feels is achievable based on the funding. And David's going to talk to you a little bit more about that. Another thing to think about with the secondary 6-year funds is that there's no match required on those. It's where the board and VDOT sort of partner, prioritize. We hold this public hearing, and then ultimately after you have your hearing, the board puts together a resolution and formally gives that to VDOT. They use that for their planning and for their construction priority list every year. And as I mentioned, the first priority is always to address any issues that were had with the last budget. I bring up these before I invite David up, just to let you know, a lot of times when I'm up here talking to you about transportation, we're talking about these other programs. So there's other funding programs that are available because we have more transportation needs than unpaved roads. You guys have probably already figured that out. So while this is the focus of what we focus on this evening, unpaved roads, we're going to be talking more in the immediate future about revenue sharing because that 2-year portal is open now. The Smart Scale Round 5 portal won't open again for over a year, but we've already started working on getting those projects lined up, learning from scoring, and trying to better fit projects in the next round. And then transportation alternatives are things that come up that could be really important as we work on the valley to valley. Those are things that are not tied to cars. And so any of these funds may be something that in the near future that I'm back here talking about, but we will be having a transportation work session in the near future to go over kind of each of these and projects that we feel are a good fit, just to make sure that we are not just doing the 6-year hearing once a year where we talk about unpaved roads and the many needs that there are. This winter really exacerbated for us a lot of the unpaved road needs that we have, but we have lots of other ones too. So we're going to be spending some time talking about prioritization and looking at other funding methods. And with that, I'm going to invite David up here, who is going to talk to you a little bit about this year's draft that he provided to you in your packet.
Good evening.
If you want to,
Yeah, I can do that.
yeah.
Make me less muffled. There we go. Much better. Yes, as Emily said, this public hearing is for to get the public's opinion, to inform the board of what they'd like to see included in the secondary 6-year plan for secondary roads. It is predominantly unpaved road type of funding because that's how it's earmarked as it comes in from VDOT. The other funding programs that Emily mentioned are great programs. They are all application based though, so you may or may not get a revenue sharing project funded. The ones we're talking about in this public hearing are every year. I mean, the allocation may change, and a long time ago it was about 10 times what it is now, but it is every year. You don't have to apply for these. These are just all allocations that come every year. Right now, this year we're talking about $520,000 of allocation. I've got that in the construction budget. What I'll do first is go through a draft plan, and it's basically last year's plan with anything taken off. As Emily mentioned, one of the first things we do is fund anything that's deficit. We don't have a deficit on any projects right now. We just advertised Yellow Sulphur Road So bids should be coming back in about a month on Yellow Sulphur Road to complete the 1 mile section of Yellow Sulphur Road that's not paved. We'll probably put Yellow Sulphur Road on next year's plan just in case there are overruns and things like that. So that's what she was talking about with covering deficits and things like that. But now the projects, they're a lot slower because it just takes a lot longer to fund them. And so usually you don't have to worry about deficits as much because we're not doing 2 or 3 a year like sometimes we used to. So first I'll go through the draft priority list. I will also go through the construction budget. The budget is simply how we're going to spend next year's money or this upcoming fiscal year's money, because that's the only actual real money we're talking about. The other roads and or the other years or allocations are all projected allocations, and we really don't know what they're going to be. So they're just kind of numbers in a spreadsheet. Next year we're we're pretty confident about that 520,000 number. So we'll go through the draft budget on where that money is going to be spread through the projects. Emily also mentioned the fact that the plan has been cut, not recently, it's been a while. The board has had a much more manageable plan. Even then, if you look at whatever the last road in the plan is, and right now, as far as unpaved road goes, it's Poplar Hollow. It may not be getting any funding until the 6th year of the plan. They call it a 6-year plan. It's really a 6-year funding plan. It's, how are you going to, it could just as easily be 7 if they wanted to project that far. It's how you plan on spending the money in each of the 6 years. And so Poplar Hollow is on the 6-year plan, but that just means it's on the 6-year spending plan, and it may not be getting $1 until the 6th year of the plan, which means it could take several more years after that to accumulate enough funds to build the project. So it's a little confusing, and it always has been. I've always hated the term 6-year plan for this because it kind of gives the impression that these are the roads we're going to build in the next 6 years, and it's not. I can probably guarantee that Poplar Hollow Road will not be built within the 6-year time frame. Anyway, like I said, I'll give the draft priority list. We do start with a couple that aren't really priorities. They're priorities, but they're sort of they're there all the time. We used to have these things called budget items where, like I told you about the construction budget, you had how we're going to spend next year's money. Well, if you had a small project that you wanted to do, we had a lot of money that was not for just unpaved roads. I'm going into a little bit of history here, but you could, if you wanted to do straighten a curve on a paved road, you could just put a couple $100,000 on there because we had that kind of money to put, knowing that it wasn't going to be a lot of design, no right away. We're just going to go in and do it. It was a budget item, and we're going to do it next year. You had to do it in like 1 year, so it was a budget item, and it was gone the next year. So it really wasn't. It didn't belong in a 6-year kind of funding plan where most of these projects have to accumulate funds over several years to be funded. So we would put those at the top of the plan as priority 0. We've got 2 of them on this. One is countywide traffic services, engineering, right-of-way costs. These are things that we charge. We charge to that account when we any kind of new signs as part of traffic services. Again, this is on the secondary system. When we go out and try to get right-of-way for a project, if the project itself isn't open for charges, we have just miscellaneous kind of right-of-way issues we charge to that account. And we put in rural additions. The county does participate in rural additions. That's where we upgrade a private road and bring it into the VDOT system. There's a means for that, and that's you're only allowed to put 5% of your construction budget on there. So it takes a while to accumulate funds for rural additions. So that's just kind of an account where we are constantly putting money in. It doesn't really. It's not a single project. The next one, this is a new one. The priority 01 is Boner's Run, Route 609 down the Shawsville area. That's been a revenue sharing project that the county's done. We're almost done with it. We are going to put some surface treatment on, and we've about spent the amount of money that we were we were given, and revenue sharing is the county puts up 50%. So it's 50% VDOT funds, 50% VDOT funds. We're about near the end, and we might need a little bit more to get the thing completed. So if we put it on the 6-year plan, we can, if we need the money, and we may not, we could move a little bit over, and our estimate is and $10,000 would probably be the tops that we would have to move. But if we deplete the revenue sharing funds, there's no other way to do it. So my proposal is to put that on there. And again, it's priority 0 because it's like a budget item type of thing. It's going to be on there this year. It'll be off next year, and it's just there in case we need to move some money over there. The heart of your priority list for unpaved roads, number 1 priority is Yellow Sulphur Road. It has been for a while. That has just gone out to bid. So we should be getting bids back in about a month, and construction starting later this summer on that. So that should be a good completion to that. We've been working on either end towards the middle. We got about a mile in the middle. It's not done. Number 2 priority is Fairview Church Road. That's a low water structure that should be constructed this year. That cannot use unpaved road funds. It has to use TELEFI funds, and it's just taken a while to accumulate funds to do that. So that's 2 on the list, but it's not taking any unpaved road funds. Number 3 on the list is Taylor Hollow Road. That's the hard surface, about a mile of road from Lester's Gate to just past the low water structure. We are currently working on right-of-way. Having a little bit of difficult time with right-of-way. One reason is we have differing, as you get into these projects, they change a little bit, and we're still looking at alignment in that. We're going to try to break out the low water structure is going to stay where it is, so we're going to try to do that first. Get the low water structure done, and then worry about how we maneuver that curve by the bridge and dealing with the property owners on either side. So we're not going to let the right-of-way hold up the repair of the low water structure. Number 4 on the list is Craig Mountain Road. We've done a bit of a project beyond where the current end of pavement is to alleviate some environmental issues. Left a little gap in there, so we're going to just fill in that gap to make it a continuous. It's only about a third of a mile. Number 5 on the list is Poplar Hollow Road. Again, another unpaved road in the kind of Shawsville area, beginning on Route 11. And number 6 on the priority list is Union Valley Road. These are drainage improvements. That's not an unpaved road, so that will be using TELEFI money only, so it'll probably be a while before we can accumulate funds to do that project. Looking at the construction budget, again, I said we were allocated about $520,000 for the year. 417 of that, 418,000 of that is unpaved road funds. Has to go to unpaved roads, and it has to go to unpaved road with a traffic count of 50 vehicles a day or more. And the telecommunication fee allocations is $102,000 right now. That changes quite frequently. In fact, I'm sure it's not that right now. I had to go in and change some allocations today, and I'll let you know. The change is, within a few $1,000s. It's nothing significant. So it's going to be in roughly the $100,000 range for a telecommunication fee, and that can be spent on non-unpaved roads if you wish. You can just use it on unpaved road projects as well to make them accumulate their funds faster. So that's our allocation. Our expenditures are $13,000 to rural addition. That's because that's all you can put towards rural addition each year. We're getting $89,000 to Fairview Church. That'll complete the funding for doing the low water slab there. $238,000 to Yellow Sulphur Road, because that's going this year. That'll complete the funding for that. And the remaining, we're starting to fund Taylor Hollow. We've already done a lot of engineering work on that, but that's the first allocation. We might have had a little bit more last year on that as well. So we're starting to fund the Taylor Hollow project. That being a mile long, just to give you a little bit of reference, even unpaved roads we do under the rural rustic design cost about $1 million a mile. So it's I'll tell you what the bid price comes in. But Yellow Sulphur Road is about a mile long. It'll be interesting to see what the price is on that when it comes in. But it's been costing us $100,000 per tenth. So if we do a half mile, it costs $500,000 just sort of kind of a rule of thumb. So there's our draft priority list, drafts and draft construction budget. We'll take public comment. I was given the sign-up list, and there was one name signed up. I'll call that name. They can come speak, and then, of course, after that, anyone else, I guess, who is here that wants to speak can as well. And the name on there is Richard Bearer. Am I saying that right? I'm not sure. Berar. I knew I was going to get it wrong.
Mr. Brar, when you come up, if you'll give your name and address, and you'll have 4 minutes. And please address everything to the board, and there is no response the board can give you tonight. This is for us to listen to you, so.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Richard Berar. This is my first ever board meeting, so thank you for having me. I live at 1035 Opal Lane, and I'm here representing all of our neighbors and residents. So there's 7 total residents who live at Opal Lane. I've been a Montgomery County resident, I guess, since about 2000, and lived on Opal Lane now for 2 years. I reached out to VDOT a few months ago to the head of, I think, the secondary 6-year program, Michelle, and she actually connected me to David. So this is actually my first time meeting David in person. I've done my research and looked in, and that the rural addition is what our road qualifies for, and I'm here to try and get it paved under the rural addition program. David said we did meet all the criteria under the rural addition to get it paved, and he told me the first step was to come here and let you know we have all the neighbor support and to get that going, and just ask that we start the process. So that's pretty much all I have.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
If there's anyone else that would like to speak on the 6-year road plan, even though you're not signed up, you're welcome to come up, give your name and your address, and you'll have 4 minutes.
Chris Waltz, 1370 Rigby Street. I'm sure all of you are aware of the announcement this past, I think it was Tuesday, by the governor in Christiansburg about the rail. I heard him say Yellow Sulphur Road. From what I can gather on the old Virginian line, it's going to go from the Salem connection up to Merrimack, which is the Merrimack Tunnel. The west end of the tunnel goes directly below, or is right about where the bridge on the Huckleberry Trail between the mall and Merrimack Road is. Well, the other end of that tunnel comes out at Yellow Sulphur Road. So they're going to need somewhere to put a station, and you should probably be thinking about making sure you get that road paved. Because as far as I can look from the maps and everything, that's about the best place that they have under the current plan to put that station. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Name and address, and you have 4 minutes.
My name is Michael Bishop. I live on Paul School Road in Roanoke, Virginia. I've had several communications with Todd via email, so I wanted to show up tonight to talk to you guys about getting Paul School Road put on that plan. In 1991, we received a letter at that time stating that the road would be improved by the end of the decade. There still hasn't been any improvements. Also on Rustic Ridge Road, there's a very dangerous curve, especially in the wintertime. And we asked at that time in 1991 that a guardrail be put up there. And in the letter we received, it stated that the guardrail would be installed that year. It still hasn't been done. So what I'm here is representing the residents of Paul School Road and asking that we get put on the 6-year plan. And I have a priority list that at that time in 1989, I believe it was, we were put on the list to be put on that list. We were on the priority list at that time. And that was 30 years ago. And we're still not getting any improvements done to the road. There's roughly 40 residents on that road, so in the summertime, you can imagine the traffic that's on there and the dust and the stuff. There's been times when I've been out mowing and cars would go by and you come in and take a shower and you can just wash the dust off of you. So for the residents of Poff School Road, I'd appreciate it if you guys would consider putting us on the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Nice to meet you, Todd.
Thank you. I just got off the phone with Travis.
Did you?
Good evening. My name is Gary Henson. I live at 1580 Poff School Road, and I'm one of those residents that Michael just described. And this is my first time at one of these meetings. My hope was just to help get us on that list for improvements. The curve that he mentioned, that was a dangerous curve that we had heard that there would be a guardrail put up. I'm a former educator, and my wife still teaches at Radford University now, but she taught Montgomery County for 33 years. And one morning on our way to work, that curve, the ditches on each side of that curve are full of detritus that gets washed out of the woods and just fills the ditches up. So the drainage is a problem there. And so when the water from a rain runs across that road and it's 45 degrees in the evening, but it hits 28 degrees overnight, those of us leaving early in the morning have black ice to deal with on a 90-degree turn on the side of a mountain with no guardrail, and you just right off the lip. And she was sideways in that road one morning, and I had to make my way to her car on the black ice and get her car off of there before someone else comes down the mountain around that turn. So it is a very dangerous spot. One of those contributing factors to that danger is just the drainage problem in the ditches. If those ditches could just be cleared and the culverts underneath kept open, that would alleviate a lot of that type of problem, I believe. And of course, that's on Rustic Ridge. And then we have pretty much the same kind of problem on Poff School Road. Thankfully, that the state comes and grades the washboard and fills the potholes, and then they cover it with gravel. Well, the traffic and rain puts that gravel in the ditches, and we have another problem. The ditches are full, and the water runs across the road, and it's a dirt road, and the state's back out there in another month grading the roads again and putting more gravel down. And it's just an ongoing thing. Plus, every time that gravel goes down and you get 50, 70 cars on it in the day, the dust is unbelievable. So I would really like to see our community get on that list to have some work done on that road. Would really be nice. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else wanting to come forward for this public hearing on the 6-year plan? David, I don't see anybody else coming back up, but would you take a few questions on it?
Sure.
Okay, well, I will go around the room again. Supervisor Bowen, if you want to start.
I'm really glad that Taylor Hollow Road is on there. You know, 2 years ago when we did that tour around the county, and we saw the big carve out on Sheriff Fidjakowski's side of the road. Well, I just drove down there because somebody, Mr. Carter, at the end of the road called me about the big, what do you call it, collapse of the road on my side of the road, a third of a mile past the low water bridge. I mean, that's a good 20-foot drop in the road, and it took about 20% of the road. And it's been eating away. Come to find out, I didn't know this until today as I was driving out and saw a neighbor. That thing has been deteriorating over the last year like there's no tomorrow. Like, that side of the road is like twice as bad as the part that was bad on your side now. So talking about falling into a ditch, this thing is 20 feet right off a cliff into the stream. So, and it's getting worse. And I'd like to say it was humorous, but the picture that was sent to me and what I actually saw was, spray paint on the road with a big arrow right here. Well, you can't miss it. So I don't know if it kind of makes me feel like, what you did on Ellett Road where you drilled into the side of the
Right.
hill. I don't know what you can do there because there's nothing practically to drill into other than carving into the other side of the hill. But anyway, I don't know if some of the money, what's allotted for the low water bridge or the road can be addressed on those, the larger piece now, and then on Steve's side too, so that the road just doesn't go away.
Right.
I don't know, like what actually funds, or where do we get money to make sure that the road is actually kept intact until you can actually do what you.
Yeah. I mean, that would just be normal maintenance, and that would not stretch the maintenance budget too much to do those repairs there. What you were talking about before, but it's a soil nail project. Those are extremely expensive, and they have to come. Those fundings have to come from a district source if we can't do them out of our ordinary maintenance. But this should be able to be taken care of out of normal maintenance.
And the gentleman, Mr. Carter, said that he put in the request, he gave me the order number and all this kind of stuff, and he wonders if anyone ever went out to see it. Is there a way to tell that? I mean, you guys are usually really responsive, and I was just like, I have to ask.
When they call the line, it gets logged into the work order. It gets logged in, and they are required to respond in some way or another. So I'd have to look and see.
I appreciate it.
And I'll go out there tomorrow and take a look at it.
And I had to take my 4Runner out there because I was worried.
Yeah.
Right. The guy sent me a picture of it, and if I didn't have it, I couldn't get back out of the road around those curves. I don't, unless you've got some serious 4-wheel drive, that's a pretty hard thing to navigate.
Yeah.
But thank you. I'd still like to see Galleon Ridge Road on the list eventually, as well as Opal Road, of course. But thank you for everything that you do.
And Opal Road would be a rural addition. That's what I talked about earlier. And so the county does maintain a priority list of rural additions, which it can change at any point.
Which road did you say?
Opal.
Okay.
The first, Mr.
That's a private road. Okay.
That was a rural addition road, not a current VDOT unpaved road.
Supervisor Blevins?
David, how many, on the priority list for the rural additions, what is our current priority list?
I don't have that. That's a county maintained list. The county just tells me which one's next. Which one we worked on Big Vein for a long time. Couldn't get the right of way, so we moved to the next one, which I believe is Cornbread. But that's a county maintained list. County staff has that list. I just don't have it on me.
Okay, and then.
Yeah, but there's probably about 10 roads on the list.
Already 10 roads on the
Probably,
list.
I'm just guessing, but yeah, there's a lot.
Okay, and am I to understand correctly, just for this coming up budget, there's only 13,000 to do, which you just explained that it takes $1 million for a mile.
Yeah. Now there's currently, I don't have the, you're not at a zero balance right now. I don't know how much it is, but it's not a zero balance. I'm guessing it's you've got about $200,000, $300,000 maybe in the, Ellie's nodding, so I think that's close to probably 3. Currently sitting in your rural addition, and we are discussing relaxing the 5% rule. That hasn't, we're not sure how that's going to go, but because literally we were getting close to $4 million probably 20 years ago, and now it's $500,000. So but the 5% part hasn't changed. So,
Kinda crazy.
you can figure out that 5% of $4 million is a lot more than 5% of 400,000.
And so, to understand correctly too, if priority list that I think one of the speakers told us back in 1989, they were on a priority list, and we've been many decades and nothing's been done. So I guess that is the county will make that decision on what comes off that list?
There were twice we had to, because, it didn't go from 4 million to 500,000 in one swoop. I think it took two. But yeah, when the secondary construction budgets were slashed, naturally the 6-year plan had to be slashed. So we went from probably 20 roads on the 6-year plan to 6 or 7. And so, yeah, probably was on the list in 91, and then it had to be cut off along with probably 20 other roads.
And the Rural Rustic Ridge Road for the guardrail, where would the possible funding, would that, since it's not going to be unpaved, it would come from that rural addition? Or
No,
would
that would come from that first priority 0 that I mentioned. It would be construction funds, but it would come from that first kind of a countywide account for minor kind of construction
one time
type.
kind of?
Yeah. So, yeah, I'll take a look at the curve and I might even have that letter he was referring to in our file and see why it wasn't done at the time.
And then on the Taylor Hollow Road, you said that the first thing would be the low water structure would be done first. But then there's no date for the construction at this
No,
time?
even for that, we're still working on, because if you've been out there, the sequence of construction is going to be very difficult on that, to replace that and still maintain access to the residents. So we've been trying to work on a detour that would maybe cut across, and we'd be cutting across private property, so we have to get right-of-way agreements to build access maybe to Blacksburg Country Club area to get people out while the construction's going on. There's time of year restrictions environmentally because you're going to be in the creek. So it's been a tough puzzle to figure out how you maintain access for people on a dead-end road when you're working on a bridge right in the middle of it.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Biggs?
I was just interested also in the guardrail because I had that same problem on Brush Mountain a few years ago. So is that something that you feel like could definitely be taken care of? Because it does sound like it's really dangerous.
Well, yeah. Well, I can't promise that the guardrail guardrail is tricky in a number of ways. You have to have room for it. It's kind of a catch-22. A lot of times you have a narrow road is where you need the guardrail most, but you can't fit it in. There's no shoulder. You put up guardrail and it effectively turns it into a 1-lane road. So I'd have to review it and see if if there's space for it, for one thing.
How expensive are they now?
Well, guardrail is very expensive. It's going to be $100,000 probably installation, depending on, obviously the length.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
The end pieces are what's the most, those new end treatments. You see the big square
ER9s?
things.
Yeah.
ER9s. That's amazing how you can remember some of that
those.
stuff.
Thank you.
Supervisor DeMonts.
Interestingly, on my way over here, I was thinking about Poff School Road because I'm very familiar with that road. I've driven on it multiple times, and I know exactly the curve that you guys are talking about. My son, who is a newly licensed driver, did a lot of learner's permit driving in that curve. I'm surprised I still have hair. So I definitely would be interested to see what we can look at for that. It's a super, super sharp curve. I don't know if you've ever been out there, but I'd be interested in seeing what we can do for that. And then Poff School Road, the first time I ever drove on that road, I had to sit in the middle of the road for quite a while to wait on a cow to get out of my way. So it's certainly very rural out there, but it would be interesting to see what kind of plans we can make. That one's long. I'm looking at it on Google Maps right now. It's a very long road. Is it unpaved the full length? Yeah, from end to end, it's
It goes,
unpaved.
from Brush Creek to all the way over.
And I because I had traveled on it so many times, you can see, it's obvious when they come in and bring the gravel in. I know exactly what they're talking about with the dust. It does make a big improvement, but then you can also see how the gravel erodes away with time and passage of vehicles over it. So I'd be interested to see if we could consider that one for the future as well. I'm not as familiar with Opal Lane, but we'll go out and drive on that one as well. Thank you.
Sure.
Supervisor Shepherd.
So I thought I heard two different things about yellow sulfur. One, that was going to be finished pretty much this year, and that there was a mile left to pave. And you're only
Correct.
going to spend 239,000 this year?
Of this upcoming year's money. It's got money that's been sitting in there accumulating.
Oh, so you have more than that.
Oh, yeah, that's just how much money of next year's budget we're going to put on it. That finally put us over the edge where we were able to advertise it.
Okay. Yeah,
Oh, no, it's going
that's
to cost $1 million.
I'll have-
Okay. Supervisor King.
Yeah. And it may be next spring before it's done. I don't, we just have to.
I appreciate the rest of the board members speaking about Paul School Road. I know the gentleman about 2 years ago had a list of all the residents on the road wanted us to look into it, so maybe we could send some out there, look and see what we can do. I know once we get Fairview Church Road off the list, maybe we could put it on the list.
Yeah, I think with Yellow Sulphur coming off next year, it'll stay on just as a placeholder in case it for funding. But I think the board will be able to add a road this year, at least one.
At least one, at least Paul School. All right, thank you, sir.
Sure.
Dave and I have two. When you were talking about Boner's Run finishing up, did you mean that you were going to finish the entire?
No, just the section. No,
Just
that
that
little
section.
Yeah,
that-
we
that
picked out a
looked at?
section with some drainage,
Right.
And we're going to go ahead and put a surface treatment on top of that.
Okay, all right. I was
Yeah.
kind of confused. I didn't think we had money to do all the rest of that.
No, it's not the whole thing. It should be just looking at a section near some residences, kind of like what we did at Craig Mountain.
Okay.
Where some dust issues
Right.
came up, and
All right, the other one is, and this is getting away from roads and bridges. Do you know if all the broadband expansion that we're planning on doing in the county will increase that telecom money? Do you know if it comes from that? I do not know.
it's collected statewide and it's distributed just on a population basis. So it's not by what activity goes on in the individual county, but if it adds to the entire pot, then, but yeah, if Montgomery County has 2% of the population of the state, it gets 2% of this fund that's collected.
Yeah, I was curious because I know on my landline phone, there's a little charge that I think is exactly what you're talking about. But I didn't know if that was on broadband. Does anybody else know if that was?
I haven't had a landline since I was a teen.
Wow, that makes me old, doesn't it? And just, I think that's all I have for those questions. But before you leave, if I could just bring up, when they did the paving through Shawsville on 460, right at the intersection of Allegheny Springs Road, on the shoulder of the road sits two, looks like 10 large pie plates, and they have yellow material in them that looks the same color as the road markings. I don't know if it's powdered paint or what it is, but apparently the contractor just left them there.
Oh, okay.
If you could have.
Yeah, it's at Allegheny Springs and what?
And Roanoke.
Oh, and 460,
460.
around 11? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if it's hazardous type stuff. I
Yeah.
think I've seen them pouring a powder into their paint machine, so I don't know if that's what it is or not, but I've had several citizens curious as to why it's there, so.
It probably shouldn't be.
No, probably shouldn't. All right, any follow-up questions?
So what happens next is the board will consider the comments and discuss them among yourselves. However, I would like to have a resolution with possibly a new project and approval of a priority list in next month sometime. And I'd be happy to review any of the roads. We've done that before. We probably can't do it because of COVID restrictions, but we used to go around and take a look at a lot of these.
Oh, we could do if we all
Yeah.
drove separate vehicles.
Yeah, but I'd be glad to review with any individual board member if they'd like to meet and take a look at some things. I'd be glad to go out.
Yeah, we appreciate it. I think this is very doable to come up with a list, so. Thank you very much.
I'll wipe out my own section here. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Emily, you didn't have anything to add to this, did you? Okay. but you're coming forward, so I'm waiting.
I was just going to put the screen back up for Vicki.
Oh, okay.
Staff will prepare a resolution for your June meeting, and we can discuss at your second May meeting if there's any discussion item. That was on one of my slides, but it's been a minute since it was up there. That's all that staff has.
All right. Next item up is going to be a public address. This is where citizens can come forward and share anything that they would like with the board. Again, same rules apply. We cannot respond. We're here to listen. So if anyone would like to come forward on public address, just state your name and your address, and you'll get 4 minutes. Seeing no one come forward, I'm going to go ahead and close public address. Next item up is addendum.
No addendum.
We have no addendum. Next item is the items of consent. Is there a motion?
Motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Secretary?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Chair Zikowski?
Aye.
7 ayes.
We've come to reports. First up, County Attorney.
I have no report, but I will reserve my time for the Assistant County Administrator tonight.
Very noble. For the County Administrator's Office.
No report.
You're not gonna use all the rest of that time?
No, I'll save it for next time for Marty.
All right. Well, you can pass it on to the Board of Supervisors report, which one will go down the list, starting with Supervisor DeMotts.
I hate to ruin the trend, but I will be very, very fast. I think we mentioned this in our last meeting. If not, a new small trail system has opened in Blacksburg. You guys are all familiar with the Brush Mountain properties, the Brush Mountain Trail Network. The trail system that has opened is called McDonald Hollow, and I was able to lay on a major guilt trip with my child on Mother's Day and make him go hiking with me, so we were able to go out and explore those trails. The trails are absolutely beautiful. They are definitely going to be very well used, I think, by hikers and especially mountain bikers. The whole time we were going up, I was thinking, man, this would be fun to come down on a mountain bike. So they're definitely a huge asset. I think the eventual plan is to connect them to the Jefferson National Forest and the Poverty Creek trails. And I wanted to highlight the county's role in that. We played a very significant role in the development of that trail network, and I think that it's worth noting that that our staff, several of them were extremely involved. I know Emily in the planning department was very involved with the process of getting those through, as well as our stormwater, erosion and sediment control people, our county engineers. So we played a very important role, not only in the permitting of that, but also in making sure that the New River Land Trust was able to secure grant funding. I did run into John Eustace on the trails, which was interesting. And he was with a gentleman named Michael Carnreich, who was with Eastern Trail Company. That was the company that was responsible for actually building the trails. And they were out there mountain biking, and then also doing some trail maintenance, just seeing how the trails were operating. And the first thing that John Eustace said was, thank you very much to Montgomery County for your role in making this possible. So I wanted to pass that along, and then also encourage everybody to go out and check them out. Definitely a little bit challenging, but good to get out and burn a few calories and sweat a little bit. That's it.
All right, end with sweat. That's always good. Next up is Supervisor Shepherd.
And I have no report.
Next up, Supervisor Bone.
No report.
Supervisor King.
Have no report, but I do just want to say it. I do appreciate Angie and the staff for stepping up this year. You've done a wonderful job, and I appreciate it.
Supervisor Blevins.
I too would like to thank the staff. It's been an exceptional year, a challenging year, and everyone has stepped up and appreciate everyone, the great job. And that's why I love Montgomery County, is that we have the best people. I wanted, no report, just wanted to do a shout out that this is May, and thank the board for the resolution for proclamation of May 9th through the 15th as National Law Enforcement Week. And just want to remember and thank all of our brave men and women that serve in law enforcement. They are our heroes. And I also want to take a moment to remember those fallen officers that have given the ultimate sacrifice to serve our county. And that's Officer Terry Griffith, Scott Hilton, Corporal Eric Suffin, and Officer Derek Krause. And we greatly appreciate the service of their and the sacrifice for their families.
Vice Chair Biggs.
Well said, Supervisor Blevins and Supervisor King, thanking staff and law enforcement. The only thing I would like to add is thank you all for letting Keith come tonight to talk about the airport. I think you can see why we're excited about what's going to happen in the future for it. And the only other thing I have to report is that it was real exciting on Wednesday to attend the bill signing for the rail with Supervisor Blevins and Chair Fidzikowski and Craig Meadows. And one of the things that, I don't know if you guys ever watched Saturday Night Live, but they did a thing on Saturday about how people don't really know how to act now that the restrictions are a little bit less when they're interacting with folks they hadn't seen before. And I sort of felt that way Wednesday because there were all these people there that really we hadn't seen, some of them in a year, and it was really sort of awkward. You didn't know if you were going to elbow or what you were going to do to greet, and everyone still had their mask. And so when I saw that Saturday night, it really cracked me up because I felt that way Wednesday. I don't know if you two felt that way, but I really did. But it was a really good event, and everyone's really excited about getting the rail finally. Yay. So that's my report.
We've had a lot of good comments, but I really appreciate that one because I was waiting for people when they approached me. Were they holding their elbow out? Was it the fist?
Yeah.
Well, you know, you got to look for those signs. And so we did our best. I think the whole event came off pretty good, and we're definitely looking forward to rail coming. I had a very interesting call today from Mary Lou Hawley, who is the director of the Meadowbrook Museum. Probably a lot of you don't realize that they have a little museum set up down there in Meadowbrook. And she was telling me about an event coming up, and she wanted to invite me and the board. For you history buffs, it's a Lewis and Clark event, and she sent me this email. She said, on Monday afternoon, May the 24th at 5 p.m., the Virginia Lewis and Clark Legacy Trail will hold a ceremony at Fotheringay Farm in Elliston to award 3 Lewis and Clark portrait signs to the Montgomery County. These signs will be erected at 3 sites that have been documented as having been visited by Lewis and or Clark. One site is Fotheringay, the home of Colonel George Hancock, who was Clark's father-in-law. Didn't know that. The other 2 are river crossings, one in Elliston and the other at Lafayette. All were mentioned in Clark's journal of November 1809.
Oh.
That's close to when I was born. Currently, there are 2 other sites being checked on and awaiting documentation. These sites will be included in a brochure about the trail, and we hope we'll encourage tourism in the area. And the ceremony is going to be held outside, so they're going to be social distancing and observing all the COVID restrictions. But I thought that was quite interesting, being right there in my backyard and right here in Montgomery County. And I appreciate Supervisor DeMott's comments on the park, the new park, but we're doing that all over the county. We're expanding it. It makes Montgomery County just a great place to come, whether you're looking for trails or for history. We have quite a bit of all of it, so I think that's pretty wonderful. And with that said, we are adjourned.